I was assigned to B-55, which B-55 was the Nha Trang Mike Force. A little about the history of B-55 and the Mike Force. B-55 up until, I think, June of '68, or April of '68 rather, was the liaison detachment down in Saigon. And in April of '68 decided we needed a larger countrywide Mike Force. So they formed Detachment B-55 as the 5th Mobile Strike Force Command with 2 A-teams, A-503, A-504. And it was stationed in Nha Trang. It was the countrywide Mike Force. By that I mean we could go to any corps and did go to all the corps in Vietnam. There's 4 corps, I Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, 4 Corps being in the Delta, I Corps being up north. Each SF commander in each corps had his own Mike Force.
When I was first in country, brand new, I was assigned to the Mike Force, didn't even know what it was. No one had ever mentioned it in training group. And so I was assigned to the Pleiku Mike Force, 4th Battalion.
I was on guard duty at the point where you came out of Nha Trang, the city of Nha Trang, back toward the Special Forces area. Well, the Mike Force, B-55, had Montangnards. Delta B-52 had Rangers, Vietnamese, and they didn't get along real well. Matter of fact, there have been a couple killings because both units were in at the same time for once. I was standing there and this Jeep came pulling up. Captain got out and said, who's in charge? And I was a sergeant. I said, I am, sir. He said, we don't want any problems tonight with the Vietnamese and the Montangnards. Don't want anybody killed. It's getting bad out here. He said, you know what the difference? I said, yes, sir, no problem. He said, keep them separated, Sergeant. I said, I'll do my best. Well, the next morning about 4 o'clock, there hadn't been any incidents. There was a couple fist fights we broke up. He came back and said, what's your name and where are you at, Sergeant? I said, Jack Tobin, I'm at the cock horse. Well, I did the part of the cock horse there in the Nha Trang, and all of a sudden they come down and got me and said, you're going to B-55, pack your gear.
And the rank structure was such that we had a major as a B-team commander, a captain as an XO, and then we had the 2 A-teams, A-503 and A-504, and they were commanded by captains, and the XOs were lieutenants. This is before the Team Tech came in, the warrant officer. And we were capable as an A-team to handle a battalion of troops. And again, each company had 3 and 4 NCOs. I was an E7 company commander. Ben Davin was an E6 company commander. And again, he had the authority and the power to go recruit his own people.
It was kind of chaos for a while because the team was so messed up. And then we started recruiting new people. A bunch of the Nungs left after Ashow. We had to start getting Montangnards.
We had about 4 or 5 SF personnel for about 118 Montangnards. That was our top-end complement. The battalions really weren't battalion size, manpower-wise. And eventually, they dropped the designation of battalion and made us into 2 recon companies, the 242 and the 241 company. And I was in both of them at one time or another. And I ended up, I think it was in the 242 company out of Kontum. And we ran mainly recon for the A camps along the border. Anywhere from Doc Peck all the way down to where Bu Prang was. It's a long area. We were in Duklap, Play Me, Polly Klang, Play Morong, Tan Can, Doc To, Doc Siang, and several of the other small areas in between those camps.
Mike Force was hilarious. We had the finest fighting troops in Vietnam, and I'm not slighting anybody else's. Our Montangnards went where we went. We lived with them, we fought with them, and too many occasions we died with them. The first company I had was Raglai and Coho. The Raglai were the most ferocious. Company Commander Mang So is the Montagnard that gave John Wayne his bracelet that he wore after that until he died.
You go up to the village chief and you go out and, you know, you had to bum a truck and bum an airplane ride and go out into the villages with the local yards, and you had an interpreter and a couple guys with you. But you'd basically go out there and offer to the village chief money to get him to supply the men to go back to Natrang with. And it worked out real well. We normally had an adequate number of people, and the time that I was there, over the almost 3 years, we trained something like 11 or 12 companies of Montagnards, airborne school, the whole bit. And we built a village for them. They brought their families down.
The Montagnards were very protective of me. There were several reasons for that too, which I learned early in my tour, and that was that if the Americans died out in the field, it was very unlikely that they would send helicopters in to pick the Montagnards up, which went against my grain, personally. But that was pretty much the standard operating procedure at the time.
When you're going to be adopted by them, they have quite a ritual about a ceremony. They'll sit down, plug you with the rice wine, or they'll give you the bracelet first. And they'll usually give you a blanket or a bag or a shirt, a rade shirt or something like that. Then you have to sit down and drink the rice wine with them. Over there, they had an old sea rat can. You had to drink 3 cans of it. 3 cans of that rice wine, you're not feeling any pain. Then you eat, and the rice is usually about half-cooked pork, some kind of vegetation out of the jungle, and then the rice, of course, with plenty of hot pepper. So now you get sweating good. Then they start beating the gongs and the drums, and you tend to wind up doing one of the tribal dances where it's almost like a snake dance. So your head's spinning pretty good, and then sometime around noon the next day you wake up and realize, okay, I'm a member of the family now because they're bossing me around. It's a neat experience, and what they will do when you go from village to village, they'll look at your bracelet. They'll know what tribe adopted you, and they actually know a pecking order by tribes. And they look at this bracelet, okay, well, he has to be respected here. If it's a sub-tribe, then they're going to top that sub-tribe, and they're going to adopt you if you know, you've got a good reputation working with them.
Now, I don't know what was the enticement for a yard ceremony. I don't know if it was a certain day they had it, or if a specific incident happened that they had a ceremony. I just know we've been to many, many ceremonies, and they're kind of brutal in that they kill the water buffalo by beating it to death. They don't shoot it or cut its throat, they beat it to death. And then they cook it somewhat. But you ask about the wine, I think there's 7 big clay pots full of rice stalks and stuff like that. And they fill them up with water the night before, and they ferment overnight. And you have to go through each station, and they have a beer can full of water, and they're pouring it into the pot. And as soon as they can empty that can, you move to the next station. But it's not real good wine, and it give you a headache. And when you go through that, then you get the Montagnard bracelet, which, you know, is, I don't know where they got the copper wire, but it looked like a piece of welding wire that they had filed on. But it was an honor, if you will, to get one.
They take it serious. To them, the bracelet symbolizes brotherhood and the cycle of life. That's why they carved carvings like bamboo on it, because bamboo is part of their cycle of life.
Each one of the tribes had a different characteristic, but they're all fanatically loyal. And once they knew you cared about them, that's all it took. First action I lost one on was down at Sea Float. And I don't tell war stories, but it was a short, intense real estate fracas. And one of them busted loose, and he saw a chance for a shot and took it. He just swung out himself without orders and just started putting grazing fire on him, just eating him alive. And of course, that drew attention to him, and he was killed. And of course, Walt got up to him and tried to save him, but he was gone by then. And he was a particularly affable Montagnard. He was just a great guy. And I'd gotten to know him in the 3 or 4 weeks I'd been working with him. Because he was always trying to learn something. He was trying to learn English, so we'd do 10 words. But he was very, very affable. And I was very sad. I stood there because we were wrapping him in a poncho, calling for the dust off, for the Navy Seawolves to get him out. And I said, if he'd just stayed undercover. He said he did, and my Montagnard company commander, Mike, so he said to the interpreter, he did what he had to do. He saw what his job was. And I said, yeah, but, they realized I was concerned. And he said, there is no yeah, but. That's how they were.
In this one operation we knew we were going on, I was at the end of my bed in my hooch, stuffing my sack with all my stuff, and getting ready for the op. And knock came on the door, and I said, come in. And then, I think it was 13 of them walked in, made a semicircle in front of me. And I'm sitting at the end of the bed, trying to figure out what was going on. And they were very serious. And EHO and EGI and SOMI took turns talking to me, and were telling me that they knew the operation was going to be bad, and that they were going to do everything in their power to make sure that I was going to live and go home, which was just a few months away, and that they would die for me. And when someone, even as young as some of these Montagnards were, said that to you, it really, it changed the way you looked at people. That someone would tell you verbally and mean it, that they would die for you. You can't put it into words. You just can't.
In the PIRs, there's a candy, 6 caramel candies. The Yards loved them. They would fit perfectly in a battery box for a Prick 25. Well, we always carried our radio men's batteries. They carried 1 battery, we'd carry 3 or 4, share the load. We've been out about 2.5, 3 weeks, and Bear notices his bag ain't getting any lighter. And they're using batteries right on. What Meatball was doing was taking the battery out of the box, filling the boxes with candy, and then giving them back and putting it back in Bear's rucksack. So Bear's schlepping 6 boxes of candy, which weighed considerable, way more batteries. He's schlepping 6 boxes of candy all over the AO. And Meatball's just laughing his keister off. Bear finally said, he said something about a battery and reached in, pulled one out, and all the candy fell out. He chased around the camp for about a half an hour. He never caught him. But this is how they thought. Mouse, I always bought a carton of Salems before an operation. I smoked Camels, but Mouse liked Salems. He would go into my rucksack, get out my hammock, get my coffee starter while I was checking the perimeter, getting everything set in. But he would not take a pack of cigarettes out of that rucksack until he asked me. And I'd say, Mouse, they're your cigarettes, they're for you. Only reason I carry them, you have no room in your rucksack. He said, I can't take without asking. Other Montagnard would think I'm stealing. And you couldn't break that paradigm. It was just, they're just wonderful people.
We were course armed, and walking through the marketplace, there was a Vietnamese officer with all that braid on his collars and epaulets. And a little Montagnard man with a cane was walking through the marketplace and bumped into him. I was probably 15, not more than 20 feet away. And of course, I stood higher and taller than most of the other people in the marketplace, so I had a good look at what was going on. The officer pushed the Montagnard man down to the ground, pulled his .45 out, and shot him. And it was just like that. And I mean, my immediate reaction was, son of a bitch. And I took the safety off my car, started aiming it, and was trying to find a clear spot in the crowd to shoot this sucker. And my Montagnards grabbed me, grabbed my weapon, and literally picked me off the ground and walked and ran with me out of the marketplace area. And you know, I was very mad. Of course, I was pretty young then too. And I couldn't understand what was going on. It was just blatant murder in my eyes. And they told me that no, if I had killed that officer, that there would have been a real problem at the marketplace from then on. And I couldn't believe that things like that actually happened, but I witnessed it.
Out in the Dongbo, whenever you recruit at New Yards, you go out on practice missions before into the woods. We're out in the Dongbo, Mickey Mouse, Mangtiu, one of the all-time smartest yards in the history of the world. But this man had been born in America. He would have probably been one of the people behind the space program. He just brilliant guy. But we're out in the Dongbo. It's been a hot day, and we've been running IA drills, immediate action drills, all day. And he keeps looking up this coconut tree. He says, "Hey, CO, I get a coconut?" "No." "When we're done." He said, "When are we done?" I said, "When we run the final ambush, we're done." Okay. Got everybody in position. I said, "When I throw the rock, it's somebody's in the kill zone." Everybody goes. I throw the rock, everybody shoots this way except Mouse, the world's best shot. Bam! Shoots a coconut stem, drops the coconuts, and while everybody else is practicing going across the road, being a radio man, he wouldn't do that, he'd be with me. He's over there chipping the first coconut. Just happy as a little clam. I said, "Why you shoot that way?" He said, "No coconut." I said, "Why'd you shoot that way?" He said, "No coconuts that way." I said, "Okay, it makes sense to me." But that's how they thought. They had a thought process that we would call rationalization. Now, Mouse knew, he had been in combat since he was 14. Mouse knew there was nobody out there to shoot back, so coconuts took precedence. And you had to marvel at them. They were tremendous in the woods. They had what Rommel called, and I don't pronounce it well in German, so forgive me, Fingerspruch. It says sixth sense. You know, in the old Western movies, Gabby Hayes looks over at Roy and goes, "Hey, Roy, hairs in the back of my neck are standing up." Well, you know, that's actually a true circumstance. I know one guy of his arm itched. And what it is your subconscious mind telling your conscious mind that you should be hearing something you're not hearing, or you're not hearing something you should. And it's trying to wake you up to this circumstance. And that's what the whole hair on the neck thing is. They had that. You could be moving, normal pace, anticipating contact, but hey, you know, it's not gonna be for a while. And all of a sudden, you see them get a little lower, getting a little more balanced on their feet. You see them adjust their load, and you realize that somebody somewhere has heard it, and you know it's coming. They're awesome. Now, correspondingly, if you went through a village, you had to stand at the end of the village as the company went past and hit every rucksack and just wait for the one you go, hit, quack, you can't take the duck. And you'd hear 2 ducks, 2 chickens, and finally everybody's giving up what they got. And they'd look at you and just laugh and walk on. But in the woods itself, they were silent. They didn't snore. I did. I used to put a cloth in my mouth to keep my mouth so I couldn't set to snore. But I would wake up and I'd check the perimeter every hour or so, 2 hours. And either that or Joe Halligan would. And you'd walk around and you would see them laying there and not a noise being made. And here's 200 people. And then all of a sudden when something happened, they knew what happened, they were reacting before you could even think about it. It was just, they lived in the woods. They were naturally, they were soldiers. I compare them favorably to the Gurkhas. I think if we'd have been smart when we left, we'd have brought the Montagnards with us and given them a state or two to play with, and they could have become the all-volunteer army because they'd have loved that idea, especially if we invaded Vietnam. But they were natural soldiers.
When Doc Peck started, the actual camp was almost obliterated initially, and this is, of course, after the fact. I found this out, and we were shipped in to support the camp. Both the first recon company and the second recon company ended up there over a period of about 2 weeks. And on our way up there, the CH-47 that was carrying a bunch of yards and myself and at least one other American, and I can't remember who it was now. We took a round outside of Dak Siang, and the chopper came in very hard, about, I'm going to say, 2.5 kilometers from the Dak Siang camp. We could actually see the battle going on from where we were. And we set up a perimeter around the chopper, and we had to call in slicks from Dak To to come pick us up to take us into Dak Pek, because that was where our operation was going to be. Well, they ended up coming fairly fast, picking us up. And when we flew over the small mountain chain between the two valleys, when we came into Dak Pek, it was under intense fire. And I remember I was the second chopper to come in. And of course, I had, being communications sergeant coming in with the recon company, I had the big bags filled with batteries, radios. One bag alone probably weighed 130 pounds, and I had 2 bags like that. As we came in under fire, the slick would not hit the ground because fire was coming in. And just as we were about 6 or 8 feet off the ground, an RPG round landed right under the chopper, exploded out, and you could hear the little wing wang of the pieces of shrapnel hitting everything. And the Montangnards that were on with me, they got off, and they headed straight for that gate. And here I am on the chopper, still trying to drag these 2 huge bags out. Well, I finally got off the chopper, and things were just snapping all around me. RPGs were coming in. And I made it to the gate, and of course found a ditch. That's where I stayed for quite a while. And finally the firing got less intense, and I started dragging these huge bags into the camp. And I remember that when I finally got within the inner perimeter wire, I finally got help from the Montangnards to take these bags up to the American Hill. Because when you entered the camp, you were on the Vietnamese Hill, as they called it. There were 7 small hills at Dak Pek, and the Montangnards ended up calling it Little Dien Bien Phu because of the same geographical similarity between where we were at Dak Pek and where the French lost to Dien Bien Phu. High mountains. I mean, they just went straight up out of the valley. Deep valley. River flowing through right by the camp, and then these 7 small little hills that were fortified. And I had gotten in, just about to where we could sprint across a small area, open area, to the American Hill. And we thought we were in an area that was safe. Right behind us were like railroad ties that had been stacked up and then burned behind it. And right down below us were the perimeter trenches with all being manned by Montangnards. And they were firing at that time, and then everything got kind of quiet. So we were standing up. We were about this far apart, and he was asking me about the radio equipment, what I had brought. And just as I was starting to answer him, a round came right between the two of us, hit the wood, splinters hit my cheek, hit his face, and I remember it was so fast, his arm shot out, hit this shoulder, and brought me down real fast. And we were trying to figure out where the sniper was coming from. Most people aren't aware that if you're close to a fence and someone else is on the other side of the fence, very close, they can't see you. But if they're further away, they can see the top of your head over that fence. And that was the position we were in. We couldn't see them, but they could see us. And I don't think they ever found who the sniper was out there. But after that, we got into the camp. And when I got up to the American Hill, I ended up putting up my equipment in the basement steps of what had been the mess hall, which was completely obliterated. The main tactical operations bunker was kind of like, had open holes in it that had been blown out. And there wasn't enough room in there for everybody. So I set up my communications gear down in this area there and started to set up communications with the FRAC 93 because FM couldn't reach out of the valley. And you couldn't put an antenna up because of the intense fire coming in all the time, so I ended up crawling along the ground, laying out the long wire antennas. And then they would just shout across to me what they wanted. They wanted an airstrike, or they wanted a resupply, or whatever it was. And when fire became less intense, I could go into the talk. It went on that way for quite a few days. Some of the most amazing things I saw up there when I first entered the camp were bodies in the wire. And there were several attacks against the camp while I was in it that always occurred at night. And the bad situation that we were in was that we were at the bottom of the valley and the mountains were so high, yet fairly close, that our 8-4 Deuce couldn't reach up high enough to hit their artillery. And what they were using was this huge mortar. It ended up being captured while I was there, or just a day after I left. But the base plate on that, we're talking 4.5, 5 feet across. The tube on it, I swear it was that big around. It was like a miniature portable artillery piece, but it was a mortar. And I remember them bringing it back to camp, and it was, they painted it blue. I remember them painting it blue. But they could sit up on that mountain and hit us with that day in and day out. And all we could do would be call in airstrikes. And during one period of time, during the siege of the camp, there had been other smaller outposts in the valley. And I remember that the VC had put up a flag on one of them. And it was just a little bit out of range of our mortars. And we couldn't get the 106 recoilless rifle from the Jeep that was mounted on the Jeep down below the hill aligned to hit it. And I remember personally calling in the airstrike after airstrike after airstrike, napalm, bombs, you name it, trying to get that flag down. Because once the flag went down, we knew that we would start breaking their spirit. At least that was the consensus in the camp. And I remember when it finally went down, a huge cheer went up around me. They finally got the flag down, but it was still at least a day before that area was cleared out. I have actual pictures that I was able to get out of that airstrike coming in on that. I don't know if you can even see the flag, but it's so small in the picture. And then later on, we ended up, when things got less intense around the camp and we stopped being probed all the time at night, that's when we started doing sweeps of the valley and the mountains around it. And I remember the second day out, we were going up one small valley that intersected with the main valley. There was a Montagnard village that was literally on a cliff. And while I was watching this little old man had come up with 2 5-gallon cans of water from the river on his back with, it was like a basket on his back. But if you ever put 2 5-gallon cans of water on your back, you know how heavy they are. And I am not kidding that the hill he ran up with like steps cut into the side of the hill must have been that steep. And to watch this little old man run up that hill with those 5-gallon water cans was amazing to me. And at that point, when I watched him go up, he was already at the top. We started sweeping up that small little intersecting valley coming down. He ran back down the hill like it was flat. I was in the middle of a sweep coming up the valley, and he was shouting in Montagnard, which was Sedang, because they were Sedang there. Luckily enough, some of my Montagnards did speak the dialect of Sedang and were saying, Chung Si, we have to stop now. And I couldn't see any reason to stop. Well, we did. And I was within 3 feet of hitting a booby trap with an old pineapple type grenade set up. And if I had taken 3 more steps, I probably would have set it off, and he saved my life. And which was sad. What is really sad about it is that a few days later, we started receiving fire from the VC, from that village. And course, the villagers have been told to move, and we had to obliterate the village.
Save the Montangnard People exists to help the Montagnards assimilate in the United States. We help them find jobs, housing. When they come here off the plane, they have nothing but the shirts on their backs. We give them a 30-day supply of food, furniture, clothing, everything they need to set up in a home. We do set up apartments. Like I said, we find them jobs. We also advocate for human rights for them in Southeast Asia. We have gone to Cambodia to get Montagnards out before that were going to be sent back. They were marked for death. We get documentation over to prove who they are. It's all a volunteer 501c3 organization. No one's paid. So what we do, we have to do out of our own pockets. It does limit us in many ways.
If we lost our culture, we lost our language, we lost everything. So we need to maintain it. That's the most important. We want our children will see we are the Montangnard people and what is our culture looks like, and let them know where they come from.
We've got a little over 6,000 Montagnards right now. This last from, our biggest push was from 4 December to 18 January, we got 259 Montagnards out of Southeast Asia. We've had about another 140 since.
We're getting them out wholesale. We're getting them out in larger numbers. We owe them that. I've never been ashamed of being an American. Until the Secretary of State said there's nothing we could do for it, they took their chances and lost. We cut and run on them, and they never did that to us. They deserved better. The Vietnamese have slaughtered probably half the Montagnard nations by now. And nobody will raise a hand except us. If we had any guts, we'd tell the Vietnamese we'll take the rest of them. If we could take 13 million illegal immigrants, 400,000, we'll make a dent. It's the right thing to do.
right back.